The spit landed on my cheek with a wet slap that echoed through the corporate party's polite chatter. I stood there, feeling the warm saliva drip down my face while Connor Riley towered over me, his expensive suit stretched tight across his chest, his breath reeking of top-shelf whiskey and arrogance. "She's mine at work," he said, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Wait your turn, little man." My wife Lena stood beside him, her red dress clinging to curves I used to know by heart, watching me with those ice-blue eyes that had once promised forever. Now they promised nothing but contempt. "By tonight, darling," she said, her voice carrying that familiar, cruel edge I'd been hearing more and more lately. The entire party had gone silent. 50 people from Lena's tech company, all watching the pathetic husband get humiliated by his wife's boss. I could see Julia Voss in the corner, Lena's best friend, and the company's PR head, smirking behind her wine glass. The security guards near the door, including my old friend Artie Russo, shifted uncomfortably, not sure whether to intervene. I wiped the spit off my face with my sleeve and looked up at Connor. 6'3" of old Boston money and new corporate power. The kind of man who'd never worked a real day in his life but somehow ended up running other people's companies. "You know what, Connor?" I said, my voice steady and quiet. "Don't forget to tell the director you're fired." He laughed, a booming sound that made the champagne glasses on nearby tables vibrate. "The director? Kid, I am the director. This is my company." I smiled then, the kind of smile that used to worry Lena back when she still cared enough to pay attention to my moods. "Sure you are, big guy. Sure you are." The party resumed its buzz, everyone pretending they hadn't just witnessed a marriage die in real time. I grabbed my coat from the check and walked out into the October night, leaving my wife with her new man. She never came home that night, or the next. 3 days later, Lena walked into our kitchen, my kitchen now, I supposed, carrying a manila envelope and wearing the same clothes from the party. Her makeup was smeared, her hair messed up in ways that told a story I didn't want to hear. "We need to talk," she said, dropping the envelope on the granite countertop we'd picked out together 5 years ago. "About what? Your new boyfriend's saliva? Because I've got to tell you, Lena, his aim could use some work." She flinched at that, which gave me more satisfaction than it should have. "Don't be crude, Evan. This is hard enough." "Oh, I'm sorry. Am I making this difficult for you? How inconsiderate of me." She pulled out a thick stack of papers and set them next to the envelope. Divorce papers. I could see the lawyer's letterhead from across the kitchen. Morrison, Bradley, and Associates. Expensive. "I've already signed," she said. "All you need to do is sign on the highlighted lines, and this can be over quickly, cleanly." I walked over and flipped through the pages. She was being generous, I had to admit. The house, half our savings, even my car. Everything fair and legal and designed to make me go away quietly. "Connor's idea?" I asked. "This is my decision, Evan. I'm not happy. I haven't been happy for a long time." "But you're happy with him." She looked out the window at our backyard, at the shed where I kept my tools and my memories from before we met. Before I thought I wanted a normal life. "He makes me feel alive," she said. "He makes me feel important. And I don't? You work in middle management at some consulting firm nobody's heard of. You come home tired every night and watch baseball. When was the last time we went anywhere exciting? When was the last time you surprised me?" I could have told her about the surprise I was planning for our anniversary next month. The trip to Ireland she'd mentioned wanting to take. The ring I'd been making payments on for 6 months. But what was the point now? Instead, I picked up a pen from the counter and signed my name on every highlighted line. Evan Keller, in blue ink, ending a marriage with the same signature I'd used to start it. "There," I said, sliding the papers back to her. "Clean enough for you?" She looked surprised, maybe even disappointed, like she'd expected me to fight harder. "That's it?" she asked. "What else do you want, Lena? A scene? Tears? Should I beg?" I don't know what I thought. "You thought I'd make it harder for you to feel good about this. Sorry to disappoint you again." She gathered up the papers and headed for the door, then stopped. "For what it's worth, Evan, you're a good man. You deserve better than this." "Yeah," I said, watching her walk away. "I do." After she left, I sat in my empty kitchen and laughed until my sides hurt. If she only knew what she'd just walked away from. If any of them knew. But they'd find out soon enough. Monday morning, I walked into the glass and steel tower that housed Pinnacle Technologies like I owned the place. Which, in a way, I did. The security desk was staffed by 3 guards, but only Artie Russo mattered. He'd been watching out for me since I'd gotten him the job 2 years ago, after the Boston PD decided they didn't need an honest cop anymore. Morning, Van, he said, using the nickname only my real friends knew. Heard about the weekend. You okay? Never better, Artie. It's Mr. Rothen yet. Been here since 6. You sure you want to do this today? Today's perfect. I took the executive elevator to the 32nd floor, past all the regular office levels where Lena worked in HR and Connor pretended to run things. The 32nd floor was different, quieter, more expensive. This was where the real decisions got made. Marcus Roth was waiting in his corner office, a thin man in his 70s who'd built Pinnacle from nothing over 40 years. He looked up from his morning reports when I knocked. Evan, I heard about the party. I'm sorry. Don't be, it's time. He nodded slowly. We'd been planning this for months, ever since we discovered what Connor and his people were really doing. The maltreatment complaints that disappeared, the expense accounts that didn't add up, the way certain employees got promoted or fired based on how willing they were to play ball with Connor's little kingdom. You're sure about this? Roth asked. Once we start, there's no going back. I'm sure. He picked up his phone and dialed an internal number. This is Marcus Roth. I need you to send a company-wide email immediately. Effective today, Evan Keller has been promoted to Executive Vice President of Operations. All department heads report to him directly. All personnel decisions go through him. And I want everyone in conference room A at 10 o'clock for the announcement. He hung up and looked at me. How do you think they'll take it? About as well as you'd expect. At exactly 10 o'clock, I walked into conference room A. The entire management team was there. Connor at the head of the table like he belonged there, Lena to his right, Julia across from her, and a dozen other department heads filling out the rest of the seats. Connor looked annoyed. What's this about, Roth? And why is he here? He jerked his thumb at me. Evan has something to tell you all, Roth said, then sat down in the corner to watch the show. I took my time walking to the front of the room, enjoying the confused looks on their faces. Lena was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Good morning, everyone, I said. I know this is unusual, but there have been some changes in the company structure that you need to know about. What kind of changes? Connor demanded. Well, for starters, you're fired. The room went completely silent. Connor's face turned red, then purple. Excuse me? You're fired, Connor. Terminated. Let go. Shown the door. However you want to phrase it. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. You can't fire me, you little nobody. I run this company. Actually, you don't. You never did. You were hired as a regional sales manager 3 years ago, and somehow convinced everyone you were more important than you actually were. But the truth is, I've been running operations here for the past 2 years. Every major decision, every personnel change, every policy update, it all came through me. Julia spoke up from across the table. That's impossible. We would have known. Would you? How many times did Connor tell you he had to run something by the home office? How many emails did he forward up the chain that never got answered the way he expected? How many times did he seem surprised by decisions that came down from management? I could see the wheels turning in their heads, memories clicking into place. The maltreatment complaints that disappeared, I continued, I made them disappear, into permanent files that HR never saw. The expense reports that got approved without question, I approved them and kept copies of everything. The employees who got fired for performance issues right after they complained about workplace conditions, I kept detailed records of every single case. Lena was staring at me with her mouth open. Evan, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that your boyfriend has been running an illegal operation out of this company for 3 years, and I've been documenting every single violation. I walked over to the conference room's computer and pulled up a presentation I'd been preparing for months. The first slide showed a photo of Connor's expense reports, $50,000 in charges for client entertainment that included weekend trips to Atlantic City with female employees. This is just the beginning, I said, clicking to the next slide. We've got misconduct allegations, financial fraud, hostile work environment violations, and about 15 other federal crimes. Connor was backing toward the door. This is BS. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I can. Artie? Artie Russo walked into the conference room carrying a box of files and a digital recorder. Artie's been helping me collect evidence, I said. Turns out security cameras pick up a lot more than people think, and when you're the head of security, you get access to some pretty interesting footage. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a still image from a security camera. Connor and Julia in his office, late at night, going through personnel files. This was taken 6 months ago, I said. Right before 3 employees got fired for poor performance. Employees who had all filed complaints about workplace maltreatment the week before. Julia was looking pale. That's not what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like you and Connor were going through confidential HR files to identify which employees to target for retaliation. Which, by the way, is a federal crime. I clicked through several more slides. Photos, documents, recorded conversations. 3 years of evidence, all carefully collected and documented. The good news, I said, is that we're not pressing criminal charges, yet. The bad news is that both of you are fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you out of the building, and you have 30 minutes to clean out your desks. Connor found his voice. You can't do this. I'll sue this company into the ground. With what lawyers? Because the ones you've been using are about to get very busy defending themselves. Turns out Morrison, Bradley, and Associates has been helping you cover up some of these violations. They're probably going to lose their license. That got Lena's attention. Morrison, Bradley, and Associates were the lawyers who'd handled our divorce. Don't worry, Lena, I said. Our divorce is still valid. Professional courtesy. Roth stood up from his corner chair. I think that's enough for today. Connor, Julia, you have 30 minutes. Everyone else, please welcome your new executive vice president. I'm sure you'll find working with Evan much more straightforward than your previous arrangement. As the room emptied out, Lena lingered behind. How long? She asked. How long what? How long have you been planning this? Since about 6 months after you started working here, right around the time I realized what kind of man you were falling for. You could have told me. Would you have believed me? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. For what it's worth, I said. You weren't part of the illegal stuff. You'll be fine. And us? There is no us, Lena. You made that pretty clear at the party. She left without another word, and I was alone in the conference room with my new job and my old anger. The fun was just getting started. Word spread fast in a building full of gossip and ambition. By lunch, everyone knew that the nobody husband had turned out to be somebody important, and the important boss had turned out to be nobody at all. I spent the afternoon in my new office, Connor's old office, actually, going through files and making lists. 3 years of damage would take time to undo, but I had help. Artie brought me security reports. Janine from accounting brought me financial records. Even some of the junior employees started coming forward with stories they'd been afraid to tell before. Around 6 o'clock, when most of the building had emptied out, I was walking to my car in the parking garage when I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy footsteps, trying to be quiet. I turned around to find Connor and another man I didn't recognize. The stranger was big, bigger than Connor, with the kind of muscles that came from a gym and the kind of scars that came from places gyms couldn't prepare you for. Hello, Connor, I said. I thought security escorted you out hours ago. We need to talk, he said. No, we don't. We really don't. The big man stepped forward. Riley thinks you do. And you are? Glenn Morrison. I work for Mr. Riley. Worked, I corrected. Past tense. He doesn't have a company anymore, remember? Connor's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won? I think I've done my job, which, ironically, used to include keeping you out of trouble. I was apparently better at the first part than the second. You humiliated me in front of everyone. No, Connor, you humiliated yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it clearly. Glenn took another step forward, close enough that I could smell his cologne and see the bulge of something under his jacket. Not a tool, this wasn't that kind of story, but probably brass knuckles or a sap. The kind of thing that left bruises instead of bullet holes. Here's what's going to happen, Connor said. You're going to call Roth tomorrow and tell him you made a mistake. You're going to say the evidence was fabricated and you're going to recommend that I get my job back. Or what? Or Glenn here is going to help you see things more clearly. I looked around the parking garage. Security cameras in every corner, motion sensors on every level, and Artie monitoring it all from his office upstairs. Plus, I had advantages that neither Connor nor his hired muscle knew about. You know what your problem is, Connor? I said, backing slowly toward my car. You never did your homework. You never bothered to find out who I was before I met Lena. I know who you are. You're a middle management nobody who got lucky. Actually, I'm a former Army Ranger who spent 6 years in places that don't officially exist, doing things that never officially happened. I came back to Boston and took a quiet job because I wanted a quiet life. I met Lena and thought maybe I could be normal. Glenn was reaching under his jacket, but he was moving too slow. 3 years of corporate life had made me soft, but not that soft. But you know what I learned in the Army, Connor? I learned that bullies are usually cowards, and cowards usually make mistakes when they're scared. I dove behind a concrete pillar just as Glenn pulled out a set of brass knuckles. Connor was shouting something, but I wasn't listening. I was moving, using the pillars and parked cars for cover, working my way around behind them. Glenn was big and strong, but he was also slow and loud. He kept announcing where he was going and what he was going to do when he found me. Amateur. I came up behind him while he was threatening to break my legs and tapped him on the shoulder. When he turned around, I hit him in the solar plexus with everything I had. He went down hard, gasping for air and clutching his chest. Connor tried to run, but he was wearing expensive dress shoes on a concrete floor slick with October rain. He made it about 10 feet before he slipped and went down in a puddle of oil and water. I walked over and looked down at him, lying there in his $1,000 suit, covered in automotive fluids and humiliation. Here's what's going to happen, Connor, I said. You're going to get up, collect your friend, and leave. You're not going to contact me or Roth or anyone else at this company. You're going to disappear and find a new life somewhere else. You can't. I can and I will. Because if I see you again, if you make any more threats, if you so much as drive past this building, I'm going to release all that evidence to the FBI. And then you'll have bigger problems than unemployment. Glenn was starting to breathe normally again, so I helped him to his feet. Nothing personal, I told him. But you might want to find a better class of employer. After they left, I called Artie from my car. You get all that on camera? I asked. Every second. You want me to call the cops? Not yet, but keep the footage somewhere safe. I have a feeling we're not done with Mr. Riley yet. I drove home to my empty house and poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon. The first taste burned, but the second went down smooth. Lena had taken most of the furniture when she moved out, but she'd left the important stuff. The chair where I liked to read, the table where I ate breakfast. The bed where I slept alone now. It was quiet in a way that should have been peaceful, but felt more like the calm before storm. I had a feeling that Connor wasn't the type to give up easily, and men like him usually had more resources than they let on. But I'd been preparing for this fight longer than he knew, and I had resources of my own. The next morning, I found out just how many. I got to the office early Tuesday morning to find Janine from the bar, where all the office workers went for lunch, waiting by my door. Janine knew everything about everyone. Who was sleeping with whom, who was stealing what, and who was planning to stab whom in the back. In a building full of corporate politics, she was like having my own personal intelligence network. We need to talk, she said. Good morning to you too, Janine. Your ex-wife and her boyfriend were in my place last night. They were drunk and loud and saying things they probably shouldn't have been saying. I unlocked my office and gestured for her to come in. What kind of things? The kind of things that suggest they're not planning to go quietly into that good night. She sat down across from my desk and pulled out her phone. I recorded some of it. Figured you might want to hear. The recording was scratchy, but clear enough. Lena's voice slurred with alcohol and anger. He thinks he's so smart, but he doesn't know everything. He doesn't know about the offshore accounts. Connor's voice. Forget the accounts. We need to focus on discrediting him. If we can prove he's unstable, violent, maybe we can get him committed. Julia's voice, apparently she'd been there too. I still have contacts at Morrison Bradley. They owe me favors. Lena again. He hit me, during the divorce proceedings. I have pictures. That stopped me cold. I'd never laid a hand on Lena, never even raised my voice to her until the very end. Fake pictures? I asked Janine. Has to be, but they looked pretty convincing on her phone. You saw them? She was showing them around the bar like trophies. Bruises on her arms, cut lip, the whole 9 yards. I sat back in my chair and thought about that. Faking domestic misuse photos was serious business. The kind of thing that could destroy a man's life even if it was eventually proven false. There's more, Janine said. They're planning to break into your house tonight, looking for evidence of mental instability, violent tendencies, whatever they can find to support their story. How do you know? Because Connor asked me if I knew where you kept your spare key. Apparently, Lena told him you always hide one somewhere. I did hide a spare key, but not where Lena thought. She'd never been as observant as she believed. What did you tell him? I told him I didn't know anything about your personal life. But Van, these people are dangerous. They're not just trying to get their jobs back anymore. They're trying to destroy you. After Janine left, I called Artie and told him what I'd learned. Then I called a friend from my Army days who now worked private security in Boston. By noon, I had a plan. The plan was simple. Let them break in, catch them in the act, and use the evidence to end this once and for all. I left work at my usual time, drove home, and made a show of settling in for a quiet evening. Lights on in the living room, TV playing, all the normal domestic routines. Then I slipped out the back door and took up position in my shed, where I had a clear view of the house and several high-definition cameras Artie had helped me install. They came at 11:30, just like Janine had predicted. Connor and Glenn, plus 2 other men I didn't recognize. They found the fake spare key exactly where Lena had told them to look, and let themselves in through the front door. I watched on my phone as they moved through my house, searching drawers and closets, looking through my computer files, planting evidence in places they thought would be convincing. A bottle of pills with someone else's name on it. Photos of Lena with crude modifications. A journal with entries that definitely hadn't come from me. They were thorough. I had to give them that. And stupid, which was even better. When they finished planting their evidence, they started looking for real evidence. Anything they could use to support their story about my mental state. They went through my bedroom, my office, even my kitchen cabinets. That's when they found my real spare key, the one hidden inside an old coffee can in the pantry, along with about $20,000 in cash and a lockbox containing documents they definitely shouldn't have seen. Documents that proved I'd been investigating them for a lot longer than they realized. Documents that showed exactly how much money they'd stolen from the company and where they'd hidden it. Documents that could send all of them to prison for a very long time. Connor was holding the papers when I walked through the front door. Find anything interesting? I asked. He spun around, his face white with shock and fear. Glenn and the other 2 men reached for tools, but stopped when they saw Artie behind me, along with my friend from private security and 2 off-duty Boston cops I'd hired for the evening. This is a citizen's arrest, I said. Breaking and entering, burglary, conspiracy to commit fraud, and about 6 other charges I'm sure the DA will think of. You can't prove anything, Connor said, but his voice was shaking. Actually, I can prove everything. See, the thing about security cameras is that they work both ways. You've been watching me, but I've been watching you too. I pulled out my phone and showed him the footage of them breaking in, planting evidence, and going through my files. Plus, I've got recordings of you planning this whole thing, courtesy of Janine at Murphy's Bar. And I've got financial records showing exactly where you hid the money you stole from Pinnacle. Glenn made a move toward me, but one of the cops stepped forward. I wouldn't, the cop said. We've got enough witnesses here to make this very simple or very complicated, depending on how you want to play it. Connor looked around the room, calculating his options. He was smart enough to realize he didn't have any. What do you want? He asked. I want you gone, all of you. Out of Boston, out of Massachusetts, out of my life. You disappear completely, and I don't press charges. And if we don't, then you go to prison for a very long time and Lena goes with you as an accessory. That got his attention. Whatever else Connor was, he wasn't completely heartless. He didn't want to destroy Lena's life along with his own. She doesn't know about tonight, he said, but she knows about the fake photos and the offshore accounts. That makes her part of the conspiracy. I walked over to my computer and pulled up a file I'd been preparing for weeks. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Tomorrow morning, you're going to transfer every penny you stole back to Pinnacle's accounts. Then you're going to get in your car and drive west until you hit the Pacific Ocean. You're going to start a new life with a new name in a new state, and you're never going to contact anyone from your old life again. And Lena gets to choose. She can go with you or she can stay here and face the consequences of her choices. What about Julia? The others? Same deal. Disappear or face the music. Connor looked at the documents in his hands, then at the cameras recording everything, then at the cops waiting to arrest him. How do I know you won't come after us anyway? Because I'm not you, Connor. I don't get my kicks from destroying people's lives. I just want you out of mine. He nodded slowly, then handed me the papers. We'll be gone by Friday, he said. You'll be gone by tomorrow night, I corrected. And Connor, if I ever see you again, if you ever contact anyone from Pinnacle, if you ever even think about coming back to Boston, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life in a federal prison. Are we clear? Crystal. After they left, I sat in my living room and went through all the evidence they'd planted. Fake pills, doctored photos, forged documents. They'd been planning to destroy me completely. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated who they were dealing with. I'd spent 6 years in the Army learning how to fight wars, and 3 years in corporate America learning how to fight different kinds of wars. Connor and his people had thought they were dealing with a middle management nobody who'd gotten lucky. They were about to learn just how wrong they'd been. Thursday morning, I got to the office to find Lena waiting by my door. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under her eyes, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her normal business attire. "We need to talk," she said. "Do we?" Connor told me what happened Tuesday night. I unlocked my office and went inside, leaving the door open behind me. She followed me in and closed it. "He said you had them arrested. I had them caught red-handed breaking into my house and planting evidence. There's a difference." She sat down across from my desk, in the same chair where she'd sat just a few days ago, when she thought I was nobody important. "He also said you offered them a deal." "I did. What kind of deal?" I pulled out a folder from my desk drawer and slid it across to her. Inside were copies of all the evidence I'd collected over the past 3 years. Financial records, security footage, recorded conversations, witness statements, the kind of deal that keeps all of you out of federal prison, I said. She opened the folder and started reading. I watched her face change as she realized how much I knew, how long I'd been watching, how carefully I'd been building my case. "Jesus, Evan, how long have you been planning this?" "Since about 6 months after you started working here. Right around the time I realized what kind of man you were falling for and what kind of woman you were becoming." "What do you mean, what kind of woman?" "The kind who stands by and watches her husband get humiliated at a company party. The kind who files fake domestic misuse charges to win a custody battle she's not even fighting. The kind who helps her boyfriend steal money from the company that employs her." "I never helped him steal anything." "You knew about the offshore accounts. You knew about the maltreatment complaints that disappeared. You knew about the employees who got fired for asking questions. And you didn't do anything to stop it." She closed the folder and pushed it back across the desk. "So what happens now?" "Now you choose. You can go with Connor and Julia and start over somewhere else. Clean slate, new life, no criminal charges. Or you can stay here and face the consequences of the choices you've made." "And if I stay?" "If you stay, you go to prison. Maybe not for as long as Connor, but long enough to ruin your life." "And if I go?" "If you go, you disappear. Completely. You don't contact me. You don't contact anyone from your old life. You don't even use your real name. You become someone else entirely." She was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the city we'd both called home for the past 5 years. "I loved you," she said finally. "No, you didn't. You loved the idea of me. The safe choice. The stable guy who would give you a comfortable life while you figured out what you really wanted. That's not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fair, Lena?" "Fair would have been you talking to me when you started having doubts about our marriage. Fair would have been you asking for counseling or separation or anything other than what you actually did." "What I actually did?" "What you actually did was fall for the first man who made you feel important, then help him destroy the lives of people who couldn't fight back. What you actually did was stand by and watch while he humiliated me in front of 50 people, then go home with him while I sat alone in our house, wondering what I'd done wrong." She was crying now, but I didn't feel the urge to comfort her anymore. "I made mistakes," she said. "You made choices. There's a difference. So did you. You chose to investigate us instead of trying to save our marriage. I chose to do my job, which ironically included protecting you from the consequences of your boyfriend's illegal activities, right up until the moment you made it clear that you didn't want my protection anymore." She wiped her eyes with her sleeve and stood up. "When do I have to decide?" "You have until 5 o'clock today. After that, the deal expires and everything goes to the FBI. And then what happens to you?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what happens to Evan Keller after he destroys everyone who used to matter to him? What happens when you're all alone with your revenge and your evidence and your perfect case?" I looked at her standing there in my office, this woman I'd loved and married and planned to spend my life with, and realized I didn't feel anything anymore. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just empty. "I guess I'll figure that out when the time comes." She left without saying goodbye. At 4:30, I got a text message from Connor. We're leaving, all of us. Don't follow. At 5 o'clock, I called Artie and told him to check the parking garage. Connor's BMW was gone. So was Lena's Honda and Julia's Mercedes. At 5:15, I got an email from an account I didn't recognize. No message, just a photo attachment. It showed Lena sitting in the passenger seat of Connor's car, looking back at the city through the rear window. She looked older than I remembered, and sadder. I deleted the email without saving the photo. At 6 o'clock, Roth knocked on my office door. "It's done?" he asked. "It's done. Any regrets?" I thought about that for a moment. 3 years of marriage, 5 years of friendship, a dozen other relationships that had gotten caught in the crossfire of my war with Connor and his people. "No," I said. "No regrets." "Good, because we've got a company to rebuild, and I can't do it without you." I stayed late that night, going through personnel files and making lists of changes that needed to be made. Promotions for people who'd been passed over because they wouldn't play Connor's games. Salary adjustments for employees who'd been punished for asking questions. New policies to prevent the kind of misuse that had been happening under the old management. It was almost midnight when I finally locked up my office and headed for the parking garage. The building was empty except for security guards and cleaning crews, and my footsteps echoed in the concrete stairwell. I was thinking about Lena's question, what happens to Evan Keller after he destroys everyone who used to matter to him? When I reached the garage level and pushed open the heavy metal door, Janine was waiting by my car. "Heard they all left town," she said. "Word travels fast." "It does when you're the one everyone's talking about." "You're quite the celebrity now, Van. The nobody husband who turned out to be somebody important." "I was always somebody important. They just never bothered to find out who." She laughed at that. "Fair enough. So what now?" "Now I go home, pour myself a drink, and try to figure out what normal people do with their evenings. Normal people go to bars and complain about their jobs and their spouses and their lives. Normal people watch TV and eat takeout and worry about paying their bills." Sounds boring. It is, but it's also peaceful. I unlocked my car and got in. Janine knocked on the window, so I rolled it down. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think you did the right thing. Connor and his people were poison. The company's better off without them." "And Lena?" "Lena made her choice. She could have chosen differently." I drove home through empty streets, past the bar where Lena and Connor had planned my destruction, past the building where we'd all worked together for 3 years, past the life I'd thought I wanted. My house was dark and quiet when I pulled into the driveway. I sat in my car for a moment, looking at the windows where Lena and I used to turn on lights and make dinner and pretend we were happy. Then I got out, unlocked my front door, and walked into my new life. The bourbon was still in the kitchen cabinet where I'd left it. I poured 3 fingers into a clean glass and took it out to my back porch, where I could see the city lights spreading out below me like a circuit board. Somewhere out there, Lena was starting over with a man who'd promised her excitement and importance and delivered humiliation and exile instead. Somewhere out there, Connor was learning what it felt like to lose everything he'd thought was his by right. Somewhere out there, Julia and the others were discovering that actions have consequences, even for people who think they're too smart to get caught. And here I was, alone in my house with my bourbon and my victory and my empty bed. Lena had been right about one thing. I'd chosen investigation over reconciliation, evidence over emotion, revenge over forgiveness. I'd chosen to be the kind of man who destroys his enemies completely rather than the kind of man who tries to save his marriage. But she'd been wrong about something too. She'd thought I was weak, that I was someone who could be pushed around and humiliated and discarded without consequences. She'd thought I was the kind of man who would take whatever she and Connor decided to dish out. She'd never bothered to find out who I really was, what I was really capable of, or what happened to people who made the mistake of underestimating Evan Keller. Now she knew. Now they all knew. I finished my bourbon and went inside to bed. Tomorrow I had a company to run, employees to protect, and a life to rebuild. Tonight, I had the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, the underdog bites back. And when he does, he takes a piece with him.